On the morning of November 30th, 2025, South Koreans woke up to an unexpected text message. It was from Coupang, the biggest e-commerce platform in South Korea, and often referred to as the Amazon of South Korea. Many of them just ignore the text message as they usually do, because they get so many spam messages on a daily basis anyway. Even to those who read the content of the message, it almost sounded nonchalant and routine, which only added to the suspicion that this could also be one of those spam messages. This is what the message looked like in Korean, and it roughly translates to how some of their customers' personal information registered with Coupang got exposed due to unauthorized access, and that they're working with various Korean government agencies to investigate this issue. The personal information exposed in this data breach was their name, email address, and the physical mailing address, at least according to the text message. Little did those who read the text at the time know that this would blow up to become one of the biggest, if not the biggest, e-commerce data breaches in South Korean history, and an existential scandal that could end Coupang's dominance on South Korea's entire e-commerce market. Turns out, the sum of their customers whose personal data was stolen was over 33.7 million South Korean customers, which is nearly 2/3 of the entire Korean population of 52 million. To put that in perspective, that's more people than the entire population of Canada. But here's the part that makes the story even more alarming. This data breach began on June 24, 2025, nearly 5 months before anyone knew it was happening. That means for almost half a year, someone had unfettered access to the personal information of 33.7 million South Koreans. They could see where you lived. They could see what you bought. They could see the security codes you entered to get into your apartment building. And Coupang, one of the most valuable companies not just in South Korea, but also in Asia with an annual revenue of $30 billion US, apparently had no idea it was happening. So how could something like this happen in the first place? And how did this lead to the US government eventually getting involved in the issue? If you're fascinated by the cautionary tale of corporate negligence of epic proportions, the sheer scale of digital vulnerability in the modern world, you might want to keep watching till the end, because sometimes you just can't look away from a train wreck. But before we get started, a quick shout out to our sponsor, Incogni. And honestly, there couldn't be a more perfect sponsor for this episode. Chances are, just like the 33.7 million Coupang customers, your personal information has already been hacked and might already be out there on the internet right now. Data brokers, people search websites, background check companies, they all have profiles on you. And that's exactly where scammers and identity thieves go shopping. They buy your data. They use it to impersonate you, open credit cards in your name, take out loans, and drain your accounts. One data breach, one leaked database, and your identity can be stolen before you even know what's happening. That's why you need Incogni. Incogni doesn't just remove you from data broker sites. They go way beyond that. Through their custom removals feature, Incogni targets the specific websites and platforms where your personal data is being sold and traded. They contact these companies on your behalf, demand your information be deleted, and actually verify it's been removed. They handle everything so you don't have to spend months doing it yourself. Think of it as you taking yourself off the internet, the same internet where your data is being bought and sold every single day without your permission. I actually used Incogni myself given my relative public profile, and the result was amazing. I wasn't even aware that I was exposed this way. So if you want to protect your data from being exploited, try Incogni via this QR code or using the link in the description. You can now use the code AsianBoss at incogni.com/AsianBoss and get 60% off of an annual plan. So that's 60% off to protect your identity and remove yourself from the internet. Hope you take advantage of our offer. All right, let's get back to the deep dive. To understand how catastrophic this data breach really is, you first need to understand what Coupang actually represents to South Koreans. By 2025, more than 1 out of every 2 adults in South Korea had the Coupang app installed on their phone. Think about that for a second. More than half the country uses Coupang. That's not just market penetration, that's cultural dominance. So dominant, in fact, that global players like Amazon, considered entering South Korea, the fifth largest e-commerce market in the world that's worth over 150 billion US dollars, and said, nah, we're good, because they knew they couldn't compete with Coupang. So how were they able to pull this off? It's all thanks to a Harvard dropout who made his intentions clear early on that he wanted to create the Amazon of South Korea. Coupang's founder Bum Kim was born in Seoul in 1978, but his family moved to the United States when he was 7 years old. He later became a naturalized US citizen, which meant that he had to give up his Korean citizenship because South Korea does not allow dual citizenship. Now, I need you to remember that detail because it would later become extremely contentious. Anyway, he got into Harvard as an undergraduate and started a couple of media ventures when he started magazine businesses. Then in his early 30s, he went back to Harvard, this time for an MBA. But he dropped out just 6 months in because he had just figured out his next big idea. It was 2010, and in the United States, a company called Groupon was absolutely exploding. Groupon's daily deals model was so hot that it marked the end of the post-financial crisis venture capital drought. And Kim thought, why not bring this idea to South Korea? So in 2010, Kim moved back to Seoul and launched Coupang, a mashup of the word coupon and a Korean sound that means fun or surprise. The business model? Daily deals, exactly like Groupon. There was just one problem though. He wasn't the only one with this idea. By the time Coupang launched, there were already 30 other Groupon copycats in South Korea. The market was saturated before Bum Kim even registered the company. But Kim had one major advantage. He was an early adapter of Facebook advertising in Korea. And back in 2010, Facebook ads in Korea were dirt cheap, like unbelievably cheap. Cost per 1,000 impressions were so low that Coupang could blanket the entire country with digital ads for a fraction of what traditional media would cost. In Coupang's first year, the company hit $10 million in revenue and signed up 3 million customers. By 2013, Coupang had pivoted from daily deals to a third-party online marketplace. Think early Amazon or eBay, and crossed $1 billion in sales. They were on track to go public. The IPO paperwork was being prepared. Kim was about to cash out. And then he stopped. Kim realized that if Coupang went public as a marketplace, it would be successful, profitable even, but it wouldn't be game-changing. It would just be another e-commerce site. So he pulled the IPO and instead, he decided to do something pretty crazy. He would rebuild Coupang from scratch as an end-to-end integrated logistics and delivery company. Not a marketplace connecting buyers and sellers, but a fully vertically integrated operation that controlled every step of the customer experience, from the moment they clicked buy to the moment the package landed at your door. That meant building warehouses, buying trucks, hiring drivers, designing proprietary software, investing billions into infrastructure that wouldn't pay off for years. It was a massive, expensive, years-long gamble. And for it to work, Kim needed to raise a lot of money as an investment. Enter SoftBank. In 2015, SoftBank, the biggest venture capital fund from Japan led by the visionary founder Masayoshi Son, who also invested in Alibaba and Nvidia, invested $1 billion in Coupang. That was a huge vote of confidence. But it wasn't enough because Coupang was losing nearly $500 million a year just expanding and building the infrastructure. Then in November 2018, SoftBank poured another $2 billion into Coupang, which was the single largest investment ever made in a Korean e-commerce company. The deal valued Coupang at $9 billion and made Bum Kim, at age 40, the second youngest billionaire in South Korea. By 2020, Coupang was generating over $11 billion in annual revenue, a 91% increase year over year. Yes, they were still losing money. In 2020, they posted a net loss of $147 million, but investors didn't care because everyone remembered that Amazon was unprofitable for 14 years before it turned a corner. On March 11, 2021, Coupang finally went public on the New York Stock Exchange. By that point, they were already an American company. Coupang had been incorporated in Delaware from the very beginning in 2010 to access U.S. venture capital funding. The IPO raised $4.6 billion and became the largest U.S. IPO of the year at that point. That meant that no other South Korean e-commerce competitor could match Coupang's resources. But having unlimited capital is one thing. Kim actually had a vision for Coupang. He was determined to fundamentally transform the e-commerce model, and South Korea was going to be the ultimate testbed. That vision was called rocket delivery. Here's what Coupang did that no one else would do. They built over 100 fulfillment centers across South Korea, covering more than 47 million square feet. They strategically positioned these centers so that 70% of South Korea's population lived within 7 miles of a Coupang facility. Then they bought thousands of custom-designed delivery trucks with sliding doors and built-in shelving so drivers could load and unload packages in minutes, not hours. They also developed AI-powered demand prediction software that could forecast what products people in specific neighborhoods would want before they even order them, and pre-positioned inventory accordingly. They built automated sorting systems that could process over 100,000 packages per day without human labor. And then they made a promise to Korean customers. Rocket delivery. Order anything, anytime, and get it delivered same day or next day. Guaranteed. 99.6% of orders delivered within 24 hours. 365 days a week. All they had to do to receive this fast delivery benefit was to sign up to a monthly subscription called Coupang Rocket Wow membership for 8,000 won, or approximately $6 per month. Tens of millions of South Koreans signed up for the membership. But as if that wasn't revolutionary enough, in 2018, Coupang launched something called Dawn Delivery. If you ordered a product by midnight, it would arrive at your doorstep by 7 a.m. the next morning. Basically, what this meant was, if you ordered something right before you went to sleep, it would have been at your doorstep before you woke up. Your groceries, or even baby diapers, anything you ordered the night before would be waiting for you at sunrise. Think about that. They completely changed the definition of fast delivery and baseline expectations of what South Korea thought e-commerce could be. And the scary thing is, once you get used to that speed, how can you ever go back to receiving items the usual way, right? Like, oh, I have to wait 24 hours? That's ridiculous. I need it faster and faster. Anyway, despite competitive pressure from the second biggest e-commerce player, Naver, this is how Coupang innovated its way to becoming the undisputed king of South Korean e-commerce. And it had out-Amazoned Amazon to the extent that Amazon just gave up even trying to enter the Korean market. But with that kind of speed, what kind of cost or sacrifice do you think would follow? Answer: human labor. There's a popular term in South Korea called Coupang man, which refers to delivery people working for Coupang who are responsible for getting packages delivered before people wake up. Gradually, people started treating them like they're supposed to be some kind of miracle workers, like Santa Claus, and took them for granted. That meant they worked all night with hardly any breaks. You see where this is going, right? The delivery people, as well as people working at the fulfillment centers, would work absolutely insane hours. And either they routinely suffered accidents due to fatigue or died from overwork. Between 2020 and 2025, a total of 29 Coupang workers died, including delivery drivers and logistics center workers, with critics blaming excessive working hours and poor conditions. In December 2020, Bum Kim stepped down from his positions at the Korean subsidiary just as South Korea's parliament was about to pass the Serious Accidents Punishment Act, which would make CEOs personally criminally liable for workplace deaths. He kept his CEO and chairman titles at the American parent company, Coupang Inc. Then in June 2021, just 6 months after Kim's resignation, a major fire broke out at one of Coupang's warehouses in Incheon. Later, it was alleged that Coupang managers had turned off the sprinkler system. Workers had reported smoke twice, but managers allegedly ignored them. The fire raged for days, killing one firefighter. Here's the thing though. By then, Bum Kim was no longer the CEO of the Korean subsidiary, which meant that he was not legally liable under Korean law. Keep all this in mind because it becomes very relevant later. Anyhow, Coupang finally became profitable and even started to expand to other Asian regions like Taiwan in 2022, which they believed would have similar market conditions to South Korea in terms of its population density. But here's the thing about dawn delivery that nobody talks about. To make it work, Coupang needed an insane amount of data. They needed to know your purchase history to predict what you would buy next. They needed your exact address and apartment entrance codes so that drivers could get in at 5 a.m. without waking you up. They needed your phone number, your email, your payment info. By 2025, Coupang had accumulated one of the most detailed databases of consumer behavior in Korean history, and that made them a target. So given the fact that pretty much everybody in Korea uses Coupang and the company generates over $20 billion annually from the Korean market alone, you would think their security infrastructure would be pretty state-of-the-art, right? Like they must have had the best cyber defense money could buy. Turns out the breach wasn't the result of a sophisticated cyber attack that pushed their system and engineers to the limit. It was something far more mundane, almost an operational negligence. In November 2022, Coupang hired a 43-year-old Chinese national as a developer for Coupang's authentication management system. He worked at Coupang for just over 2 years. In July 2024, for some unknown reason, he physically left South Korea and returned to China while still technically being employed by Coupang. His employment with Coupang was officially terminated roughly 6 months later, in December 2024. Multiple sources suggest that he was dismissed or fired, while other sources say he simply resigned. It's interesting that Coupang wouldn't confirm whether his resignation was voluntary or not. But anyway, it's what the development did roughly 1 year after leaving South Korea for China that would lead to the biggest data leak in modern Korean corporate history. You see, the central controversy regarding his hiring is, yes, his Chinese nationality, but also the level of access he was granted at Coupang. Despite being a relatively recent hire, he was assigned to the authentication management system, which is a gatekeeper role granting him direct access to the master keys that secure all user accounts. So whenever the developer wanted to access the authentication servers, he would use his cryptographic signing keys, the master keys, to prove, yes, I'm authorized to be here. Here's a critical problem. When he left Coupang and flew out of South Korea in July 2024, the company never revoked his master keys. You know how when your employment comes to an end, there's usually an offboarding process, right? Like you have to surrender your security pass and hand over your email account. In Coupang's case, this former employee's digital credentials, his master keys, were never revoked and just remained active in the system. Now, the CEO of Coupang Korea, who would later step down, disputes parts of this account. He explained that the individual in question was a developer who built the authentication system and that his access rights were revoked right after resignation in December 2024. However, that explanation doesn't really account for what happened next. For about a year after he left South Korea, nothing happened. Then beginning on July 24th, 2025, this former employee started using his master keys to generate tokens to impersonate normal Coupang users and access their accounts. He didn't even need to log in like a normal user, entering a username and password, because he was using cryptographically valid tokens generated by his master keys. He didn't trigger any login failures or suspicious activity alerts. To Coupang security monitoring systems, the access requests appeared legitimate, as if users were simply checking in their own accounts, even though they were coming from overseas IP addresses. And that's how he was able to pull all of the user's personal information: names, personal numbers, residential addresses, apartment entrance codes, and order histories, all 33.7 million users. The data breach went undetected until November 16, 2025, And it would have kept going unnoticed, except the former employee himself sent threatening emails to Coupang customers claiming he possessed their personal data and it would expose the breach unless Coupang strengthened its security. Alarmed customers immediately reported these messages to Coupang, and this prompted an internal investigation that revealed the breach had been ongoing since June 24th, 147 days without detection. So by the time millions of South Koreans received a rather mundane text message about the data breach from Coupang, Coupang must have been aware of how badly they had fucked up. But they probably weren't expecting the magnitude of the public and media backlash and the subsequent government intervention because, yeah, shit really hit the fan. What made things worse was Coupang's initial response. The company attempted to downplay the severity of the breach, announcing they had conducted their own internal investigation and successfully recovered the suspect's damaged laptop from China. Their exact words were, they actually contacted the former employee in China, and he apparently just agreed to hand over his damaged laptop that he destroyed. The issue here is that because China does not have an extradition treaty with South Korea for this type of crime, it is highly unlikely he will ever be handed over to Korean police for prosecution, unless he flies over to Korea voluntarily, which he won't. Based on this discovery of the laptop, Coupang initially claimed that only a few thousand customer records had been compromised. But this narrative was slammed by security experts and government investigators, who pointed out that recovering a laptop meant nothing if the data had already been exported to cloud storage or external servers. The few thousand claim was later exposed as grossly inaccurate when Coupang's own forensic analysis of server logs and authentication records revealed the true scope. The actual figure of 33.7 million users was confirmed just 11 days after the initial announcement, making it clear that Coupang had either severely underestimated the breach or deliberately tried to minimize its scope. Here, I should also add that Coupang didn't have these security problems in Taiwan, the region where Coupang is expanding aggressively. For the Taiwanese market, Coupang had already introduced Coupang Passkey, a password-free biometric authentication system using facial recognition or fingerprints to verify identity. Coupang currently does not use this passkey technology in the Korean market, and having implemented it would have completely prevented the data breach in the first place. Optics-wise, this gave Korean lawmakers the impression that Coupang had prioritized security for its growth market in Taiwan while taking the South Korean market for granted. The Korean media outlets absolutely went nuts, providing 24-hour wall-to-wall coverage for weeks. In doing so, they dug up Coupang's troubled past, years of labor disputes, allegations of worker exploitation, and internal communications revealing executives' attempts to bury reports of a fulfillment center employee who died from overwork. By connecting the data breach to this darker history of corporate negligence, the media inadvertently transformed the founder Bum Kim into the most recognizable public figure in South Korea. The angry Korean public responded by boycotting Coupang. In a matter of weeks, the company lost over 2 million customers, and the CEO of the Coupang Korean subsidiary resigned. The Korean offices of Coupang were raided by government investigators for everything from criminal negligence to potential tax fraud, and the interim CEO of Coupang Korea was forced to attend a televised government hearing to explain the company's position. If that wasn't already bad enough, things got worse when Bum Kim, with his face plastered all over the Korean media, was nowhere to be seen when the Korean government demanded his presence at the hearings. His excuse? He cited his responsibilities as the CEO of Coupang Inc., the US-based holding company operating in over 170 countries. He claimed that he had pre-arranged business commitments that he couldn't cancel. Legally speaking, he's a naturalized US citizen who runs an American corporation, and there's technically no way for South Korea to forcibly compel him to appear. This really pissed off the Korean lawmakers, who pointed out that Coupang generates over 90% of its revenue from South Korea, meaning it's essentially a Korean company trying to hide behind the founder's US citizenship and the corporation's legal status as an American entity. In response, the National Assembly voted to file a formal legal complaint against Kim, and Korean lawmakers even threatened to invoke the Immigration Control Act to ban Kim from ever entering South Korea. Kim later issued a written apology without showing up in person, promising to pay about $1.2 billion in compensation to the victims, which equates to each victim receiving 50,000 won, or roughly $35 each. But even that was designed to benefit Coupang more than the victim, because the compensation wasn't even cash. It was split into discount vouchers for Coupang services. Most of the vouchers were for Coupang travel and luxury goods, which required users to spend significantly more out of pocket to actually use them. Consumer groups immediately rejected the plan as a cheap marketing ploy rather than genuine compensation. As a result, Coupang has lost $8 billion in market capitalization, and now it's getting sued in the United States. Coupang investors and affected users have filed multiple class action lawsuits against the company, claiming Coupang had failed to maintain adequate cybersecurity standards and misled investors about the company's risk management practices. So obviously, things don't appear to be trending in the right direction for Coupang. But what does this all mean for the Korean consumers whose personal information is now completely exposed? In the Korean context, voice phishing scams mostly take the form of phone calls from criminals impersonating prosecutors or police, bank officials, and delivery services. Here are some mind-blowing numbers. By 2024, South Korean citizens were losing 855 billion won, which is roughly $615 million annually, to voice phishing alone. But that record was shattered in 2025. In just the first 10 months of the year, before the Coupang data breach even became public, South Koreans had already lost over 1 trillion won, which is about $718 million, to phone-based fraud, surpassing the entire previous year's total losses. If that's not shocking enough, the typical victim is now being targeted by scammers an average of 56 times per year. It just goes to show how intense psychological pressure can make people panic, especially when criminals are armed with accurate personal information. In one of our previous videos, we cover some of the most common scams perpetrated by criminal gangs in Cambodia. But even those operations typically did not have access to the depth of personal information that is routinely used against victims in South Korea. From our research, there appear to be 3 broad tactics commonly used by scammers in the Korean context. First, scammers call victims claiming to be prosecutors, police officers, or court officials investigating criminal activity allegedly linked to the victim's stolen identity. Think about it. Wouldn't you pay attention if you suddenly got a call from the police or a prosecutor? They then demonstrate their legitimacy by reciting your full name, resident registration number, phone number, and sometimes even your past banking information. By this point, many people are already convinced. Here is their MO. The victim is told that their bank account is about to be frozen as part of the investigation, but that there is a short window to secure their money before that happens. The caller then instructs the victim to voluntarily transfer their funds to what is described as a government-controlled account for safekeeping during the investigation. Victims are typically given 2 options: either make a direct bank transfer on their phone or withdraw cash from an ATM and hand it over to a courier posing as an investigator. The entire process happens while the victim is kept on the phone and told not to speak to anyone else, because doing so would constitute obstruction of justice. The scam works precisely because no hacking is required. The criminals rely entirely on authority, fear, and psychological pressure to make victims move their own money. The second type of scam is similar, but involves criminals impersonating banks or credit card companies this time. Victims receive a call warning that a loan has been taken out in their name, or that a suspicious financial transaction has been detected. Again, The call sounds totally legitimate because scammers often already know which bank the victim uses, whether they have recently applied for credit, or even their employment status. The caller presents themselves as part of a fraud prevention team and instructs the victim to secure their assets from the fraudulent loan by temporarily moving their own money to a so-called safe or verification account. The theft occurs when victims, believing they're protecting themselves, voluntarily move their own money, which is then immediately routed through multiple accounts and disappears. The third and most widespread scams in South Korea revolves around delivery services. Victims receive a text message claiming that a package could not be delivered due to incorrect information, unpaid customs fees, or a delivery error. The message often looks routine and harmless, especially in a country like Korea where people receive packages almost daily. What makes these scams so effective is that the message frequently includes real personal details, like the victim's name, phone number, or address, and even sometimes references a recent purchase. Victims are prompted to click a link to resolve the issue, which leads to a fake delivery website designed to closely mimic legitimate courier pages. In some cases, victims are asked to pay a small fee, often just a few dollars, for re-delivery or verification. And the moment they enter their credit card details, the information is stolen and used for fraudulent charges. Unlike prosecutor or bank scams, which rely heavily on prolonged phone calls, delivery scams succeed through sheer scale and familiarity. Small, believable requests that quietly escalate into much larger losses. What unites all three scam types is the same brutal advantage: knowledge. Knowledge of intimate personal information that no one should have unless they were from the government, the police, a bank, or a delivery service provider. For me, this raises a fundamental question. How do scammers in South Korea have access to so much personal information in the first place? All the scams that I just described were already happening before the Coupang data breach. So does that mean there were similar data breaches in the past? It turns out, yes, several times. Prior to Coupang, some of the biggest companies in Korea had their customer data stolen on a massive scale. In 2014, a breach at Korea Credit Bureau exposed the personal information of roughly 20 million people. In 2025, SK Telecom, South Korea's largest telecommunications provider, disclosed a major data breach affecting 27 million people. There were also Lotte Card in 2025, which exposed the personal data of 2.97 million customers. At this point, it's fair to say that virtually the entire population of South Korea had their personal data compromised, and much of the data continues to circulate on the black market. As a result, most Koreans don't even bother answering numbers they don't recognize anymore, or check text messages unless they receive them through KakaoTalk, the country's most widely used messaging app with end-to-end encryption. Actually, I should clarify, most young Koreans know what to do. Elderly Koreans who aren't tech-savvy are the most vulnerable group for phishing scams because they still answer unknown numbers or texts. These scams have gotten so sophisticated that many elderly Koreans now regularly receive text messages from their children whom they haven't heard from in years, asking for money because they're in trouble. And they send it, not realizing it's a scam until it's too late. It's really getting out of control. Objectively speaking, I get that the company really fucked up and could have handled the situation a lot better. But any reasonable observer would agree that the intensity of the media coverage and the government response feels disproportionate. If large portions of South Korea's population have already had their personal data compromised multiple times through the failures of other domestic companies, did those companies face a similar level of sustained political and media backlash? The answer appears to be no. Many of the companies responsible for the past large-scale data leaks faced relatively limited penalties, and in some cases were not even fined at all. So one could reasonably ask, why is Coupang now being so aggressively targeted by Korean lawmakers and the press? Lawmakers are even discussing banning the Coupang founder from ever entering South Korea, and imposing potential business suspensions on the whole company. Responses that were not seen in any previous data breach cases involving other major Korean companies. I'm not trying to be conspiratorial here. I'm just presenting to you what's being discussed on Korean online platforms right now. This is the other side of the debate. Why is the Korean government so eager to make an example of Coupang when Chinese alternatives like Temu or Alibaba, services with far less regulatory oversight and openly acknowledged data sharing practices with the Chinese government, are being welcomed into the Korean market? Is this really about security, or is it about something else entirely? And that question is now what's leading Coupang to push back. Just days after the televised National Assembly hearing, where Coupang Korea's new CEO was grilled and openly shouted at by Korean lawmakers, the South Korean government was suddenly notified that the United States was indefinitely postponing a free trade agreement joint committee meeting, citing concerns over Korea's treatment of American companies. From our research, it looks like Coupang spent $10.75 million over 5 years lobbying the US government with a message that it is an American company being unfairly targeted by Korea in ways that undermines US national interests. One US lawmaker even issued a statement declaring that American companies like Apple, Coupang, Google, Meta, Netflix, and Uber have all been targeted in South Korea, and that he saw a campaign of aggression from within the Korean government targeting American businesses and American citizens. Remember, Bum Kim, the founder of Coupang, is now an American citizen. So what began as a data breach has, at least in part, evolved into something much larger, a geopolitical dispute between two allied nations, the United States and South Korea. It's no longer clear how far Korean lawmakers can continue to push in punishing Coupang without provoking further backlash from Washington. In that sense, it could very well be that Coupang is now just too big to fail in more ways than one. From its massive logistics infrastructure that powers dawn delivery to the political leverage that it comes with being a US-listed company. In all likelihood, Coupang will be forced to pay a fine in the range of $1 billion, which is minimal for a company that generates over $30 billion in revenue globally last year. The real issue, though, isn't companies' balance sheet. It's Korean consumers. They're the ones living with the constant threat of phishing scams and the erosion of trust in digital services. They're now facing the unfortunate reality that when it comes to everyday necessities like groceries, Coupang has changed the definition of convenience, arguably for the worse. There was even local news coverage showing people physically visiting supermarkets for the first time in a while, with some saying, it's actually nice to be out shopping for groceries again. In a country that has come to rely so deeply on speed, convenience, and a tech-driven way of life, who actually bears the cost when the system breaks? And who, in the end, is left with no real choice at all? This isn't just about South Korea. As technology becomes more advanced and we all grow increasingly dependent on convenience, maybe it's worth asking, are we willing to pay the price? Because we already are. We just don't know it yet. If you found this video insightful and learned something new, make sure to subscribe to Asian Boss and let us know in the comments about your experience with the data leak and phishing scams. Hopefully by now, you appreciate how important it is to keep your personal information off the internet. And I hope you really take advantage of our sponsor, Incogni's offer. Okay, so this next part is really for those of you who stayed until the very end. It's where I share a little bit more about how we think about our content and where we want to take Asian Boss next. For our next session, we are selectively inviting a small group of people to take part in a live stream discussion. The topic will revolve around personal experiences with scams, but not just extreme cases. Maybe you've received a scam call or a message that almost worked. Maybe you warned your parents or grandparents about scams, but realize how difficult it is for them to spot red flags. Or maybe you are close to this problem in banking, telecom, customer support, or tech, and see things most people don't. You don't need to be an expert, and this isn't about becoming famous or performing on camera. What matters is that you're comfortable speaking in English and can share honest, real experiences that'll help inform a global audience. If this sounds like something you'd like to be part of, you can fill out the form in the description and submit a short video introduction of yourself. Just speak directly to the camera like this and keep it simple. Tell us who you are and why you think your perspective would add value to this conversation. I'll personally review every submission, and we'll only move forward with this live stream format if we find enough participants who can genuinely bring insight to the topic. Of course, I'm Stephen Park. Thanks for watching all the way till the end. And as always, stay curious.